A news story this week troubled me even more than most news stories trouble me, because of the potential for personal involvement in this one. I don't know if you saw the story in the news about a call-up, a military call-up for Brits, for British people. No lesser figure than the Chief of the General Staff has been out in the world saying that the government, the British government, should mobilise the nation. Those are his words. Mobilise the nation in readiness for, deep breath everyone, fighting Russia. So, get ready for war with Russia. Don't just get ready to watch war with Russia. Get ready to fight Russians. Hand to hand, in uniform. According to General Sir Patrick Sanders. 2 years ago, the same soldier said that Britain was facing its, quote, 1937 moment. So 2 years ago, he made a reference to the 2 years before the outbreak of World War II. You know, when things were looking ugly. He says, and it's being said by observers, that he's not actually talking about conscription quite yet. Which, if he did, it would be the first time in 60 years that there was mandatory military service in this country. But it sounds like mood music to me. You know, the last few years have taught us something about pattern spotting, and it's that words come out. They leak out like steam from a kettle, and you hear them, and then you think, did I hear that right? And then you hear them again. And then you hear it again, and it spreads like a kind of virus, you might say, so that you hear it on the news. And so if a senior soldier is talking about, you know, mobilising the nation and getting ready to fight Russia, you can bet that he's not just thought that up over his morning coffee and said it. You can bet your sweet bippy that it's there in the establishment. And they've decided to, let's just run it up the flagpole and see who salutes, would be the expression that comes to mind. It's worth knowing that Sanders, General Sanders, is standing down from his role. He's retiring. Apparently, how would I know, but apparently there's been a falling out between him and Admiral Sir Tony Radakin. And Admiral Sir Tony Radakin is the overall head of the British Armed Forces. Sanders is Army, but Admiral Sir Tony is, you know, in charge of the whole kit and caboodle. And you'd also have to wonder, if you were cynical and suspicious like I am, or like I've become, whether Sanders has been primed, you know, on your way out, just as you grab your coat and walk out the door, just one last hurrah. Just raise the spectre. Just put it out there. You know, you won't have to carry the can for this. You know, you'll be gone. But, you know, put it out there that we might need to have a call-up, press people into armed service to fight Russia, or whoever. China, Iran, take your pick. There's been talk in high places as recently as last year about bringing back national service. So much time really has passed since there was national service in this country. It went away in the 50s. That, unless you're our generation, you don't even really know what that is. It's long gone. Other European countries still have it. You know, all sorts of places. You leave school, and either before or after university, or certainly before getting on with the rest of your adult life, you do time, a year or 2 or 3 in the armed services. That's still the case in many many countries around the world. In principle, I don't actually have a problem with it. In a rational, sane universe, in a rational, sane country being run by, governed by rational, sane people, I don't have a conceptual problem with national service. My dad did national service, loved it. He nearly stayed in. He was in the RAF for, what was it, a couple of years. from he was 18 till he was 20 or whatever. And actually, for the rest of his life, he actually sort of regretted that he ever came out. He thought he might have had a better career if he'd stayed in the Royal Air Force. He did his time in Changi, which was in Singapore. It's now the airport that you fly through on the way to other places, but it was a radio station, amongst other things, and an airfield at the time in the 50s. But this is different. The intention to find a way to get our sons and daughters, because it's equal opportunities carnage nowadays. Look at Ukraine. Look at pregnant women in the front line in Ukraine. The intention is to find a way to get our sons and daughters into harm's way is demonstrably out there. I'm telling you, it's mood music. They're getting people ready to contemplate the thought. It won't go away on its own. And this both fascinates and appalls me. It fascinates me because it's happening against a backdrop of our younger generations having been raised to think ill of their country, to regard their ancestors, their predecessors, and their predecessors' traditions and heritage and culture as uniformly shameful, fit only for forgetting. You know, hence all the renaming of streets and buildings and the tearing down of statues. You know, and anyone and everyone from the past is a slave trader or a white supremacist. You know, and that's the paideia, the environment in which several generations have been raised. It didn't happen to me. I got out of the education system really before that happened, but it's been happening ever since. You know, the capture of the institutions, schools and universities among them, as well as the capture of the mainstream media, has provided the establishment, let's say, the establishment with all the opportunity and means it has needed. And it's bizarre, it's perverse, but the establishment of Britain has seen to it that Britain is portrayed and works its way into the consciousness of the young of the country, that Britain is a racist, xenophobic, white supremacist, transphobic, Islamophobic, whatever, generally objectionable place in need of a major overhaul. And so, given that context in which Britain is a bad place, in inverted commas, that the establishment would, against that backdrop, herd our young into the armed forces so that they might, well, what exactly? Fight for king and country? I don't think so. Not seriously. Britain is not regarded by the establishment as worth defending. You know, they'll deploy forces to secure the Red Sea, but they won't do anything to defend the English Channel. On the contrary, I remember, you know, the sight of an RNLI lifeboat used to be life-affirming to me. You know, that livery, that purple and orange. And I've been rescued by the RNLI. I got into dire straits while filming for Coast. We got into difficulties. I won't go into the details, and we had to call out the RNLI, and the sight of that boat coming, and then when the crew did what they did, which was rescue us. You know, it was like when you spot the AA or the green flag vehicle coming when you're broken down on the motorway times 100. And so I used to see the RNLI's life affirming. Now every image of it that you see on the television is depressing, because it's the RNLI being used as a taxi service for migrants, and the Border Patrol, those entities that are ostensibly there to maintain the border. They don't. They go out there and bring people through the border without asking any questions, and then put them on buses to hotels. It's another subject. So, on the contrary, rather than defend Britain, as General Sanders makes plain by mention of Russia, they're going to be cannon fodder for war in Ukraine. Rishi Sunak and Grant Shapps have already spoken about that war, about us being committed to Ukraine for 100 years or more. Right? And they're all talking in terms of, they're signing up with Europe, striking deals with Europe 10 years long, all in the notion of security of some sort or another. So that's where the kids would go. They'd go to war in Ukraine or wherever else as part of the military-industrial complex's investment in war for profit, amid complete disregard for their lives, or any lives, except their own. I'd put good money on the fact that the sons and daughters of the establishment figures, for some reason, they won't be conscripted. They won't get called up. You mark my words. Those in the establishment now, the government and the rest of it, are wholly enthralled to money. The transnational banks and the transnational corporations that together make all the decisions that affect our lives and that we're not part of. The centuries of the nation states are drawing to a close. Mark my words. What beckons is a future that the globalists already describe using jargon like stakeholder capitalism and public-private partnership. And you can call it what you want, but in practice and reality, it's about the people, you and me, having no say, and the banks and the corporations and the governments making all the decisions on our behalf and for the benefit and betterment only of them. And to hell with us. And now they think they'll help themselves to our kids. Even us. I mean, it's middle-aged men that are fighting the war in Ukraine now. Everybody else is dead or fled the country. And it's not so very long ago that we were celebrating the arrival of Ukrainian people here, you know, having fled the war. But now all across Europe, they're being labelled as some kind of cowards and traitors and being summoned back to fill the remaining unfilled graves. So they're going to help themselves to our kids. They're going to send them into graves in foreign soil so that the corporate interests of the globalists might be further sated and satisfied. Whoever goes, whoever's put into uniform and sent, they won't be fighting for king and country. They'll be fighting for the City of London and Wall Street and the rest of the money markets. My wife has already said, before this latest outrage in the news, she's already said that, you know, before this mood music played so as to install earworms in the heads of the general public, that if anyone comes for our kids, there surely will be bloody murder done, and not in Ukraine or on any other foreign soil, but right here on our doorstep. Love of country is a thing of the past as far as establishments are concerned. It's a primitive ritual now as far as the globalists are concerned, having anything invested in the land of your birth. We've been taught that. Nations are to be regarded with disdain. So that the wider philosophy is that you're supposed to think it doesn't matter where you think you belong. As far as the stakeholder capitalists are concerned, you'll belong wherever you're sent. That'll be good enough for you. You won't be putting down roots anywhere. You'll be like tumbleweed. You'll just move about at on their whim. Our politicians won't fight for our country. They care not a jot for the country. So why should our children fight for country? And for what? What would they be fighting for exactly, I ask? Over in Ukraine, their young are dead already. As I've said, it's the middle-aged, soon it'll be the elderly, that will be filling spaces on loan from the clay in hastily assembled plywood coffins, if not just wrapped in a funeral shroud and put in a mass grave. And the first lie about Ukraine was that it was about preserving democracy. And that line was being trotted out by globalists who were already treating democracy like a bad joke. And more recently, the lie is that it's about stopping Putin's invasion of Europe. Like he's going to go on from Ukraine to whatever, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, whatever. It's nonsense. The truth, as far as I'm concerned, is that they're fighting to keep the Russians away from American biolabs in Ukraine. And they're fighting to keep open the pipelines that pump money into Ukraine, our money, any money, where it might be laundered. and then pumped back into the coffers of the military-industrial complex and the bank accounts of their government and corporate lackeys. What the establishment either doesn't understand or simply disregards is that you can't erase the nation states and still pretend that the youth of those nations might be expected to don the appropriate uniform and sacrifice their lives for those apparently outdated, outmoded notions. And certainly not when the only thing to be defended and championed in reality is the income of the already bloated rich and powerful. Now, here's the thing, young men who don't know each other, and certainly don't hate each other, are always sent to war by old men who do know each other and don't hate each other, and who shake hands and pocket the profit when all the young men are dead. That's always been the way of war. What we have to learn in the midst of this time of madness, and I'm talking about the madness of the psychopathic, protected parasite class, is that groups, entities go bad. It can happen to anyone. Governments go bad. Ideologies are twisted and corrupted to the point where they must not be defended or supported any longer, but on the contrary, put right by the people they're supposed to be serving. Sometimes you have to step outside of your group, see it for the corrupted entity that it's become, and take on the responsibility of putting it right, even if you have to try and do it on your own. A single drop of water is how a waterfall starts. And then it becomes the waterfall when enough droplets of water come together and move in the same direction. We are we're misled now by bad people. Simple. Bad people. People who went bad long ago. People who are the inheritors, the successors of other bad people who went before them, who set in train the capture of the institutions, the corruption of the ideologies, the move away from nation states, the disregarding of everything that people have valued for generations: culture, traditions, history, identity. The truth to be faced is that if there's another war coming, then the only war that will be worth fighting, will be the war against those corrupt and rotten institutions that have already done unforgivable and unforgettable harm to everything we care about. I'll leave you this week with 3 quotes. If the injustice is part of the necessary friction of the machine of government, let it go, let it go. Perchance it will wear smooth. Certainly the machine will wear out. But if it is of such a nature that it requires you to be the agent of injustice to another, then I say break the law. Let your life be a counter-friction to stop the machine. What I have to do is to see at any rate that I do not lend myself to the wrong which I condemn. That's Henry David Thoreau in Civil Disobedience and Other Essays. Also, colourful demonstrations and weekend marches are vital, but alone are not powerful enough to stop wars. Wars will be stopped only when soldiers refuse to fight, when workers refuse to load weapons onto ships and aircraft, when people boycott the economic outposts of empire that are strung across the globe. That's Arundhati Roy in Public Power in the Age of Empire. And finally, let us put it generally. If a regime is immoral, its subjects are free from all obligations to it. And that's Alexander Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag Archipelago. I'll leave it there.